question I'm excited to ask you is, you were a participant on Shark Tank, and you had a really interesting episode and experience. And so talk to us about your experience on Shark Tank and what was that overall experience like?
Yeah, I mean, that was a blast, and that's one of those like bucket list type of things, right? That in human history, there will only be a few thousand people that participate, right? In the Shark Tank, Dragon's Den, I think it's called like Lion's Den in Africa, right? Each continent sort of has a different form of it, right?
Okay.
But we're only talking about a few thousand people that were ever sort of participate in it. So the first thing to point out, it is very hard to get in. So I believe Princeton, Harvard, Yale, they have an acceptance rate of like 4-ish%.
Okay.
Right? So tens of thousands of people are applying, and each year only, for Princeton it's about 1,400 students are actually getting in each year. Shark Tank, the math is even crazier. They end up bringing about 160 people that they film, and then 160 companies, and then of those 160 companies that they film, only between about 90 or call it 80 and 100 companies actually air in the season, right? And then ultimately the applicant pool ranges anywhere from about 30 to 60,000 people.
Wow.
Meaning that getting on Shark Tank is about 25 times harder than getting into a Harvard, Princeton, or Yale.
Which you've accomplished both.
That's correct, yeah.
Wow. Wow.
I'm very proud of it, and I think, one of the things is that it wasn't sort of a free magic carpet ride to get on. We applied. We were initially sort of denied. Finally, they kind of, through a bunch of prodding via emails, they sort of decided, we'll let you kind of back in the process. We sent in audition tapes and worked with the producers a lot. And ultimately, Shark Tank is on ABC, and ABC is owned by Disney. Right? And Disney has certain Christian values that would make it weird for them to have a subsidiary company showcase something that could be described as a hangover cure.
Okay.
Right? And so they actually, wanted us to come on the show and then actually kicked us out of the process. So I basically pulled an all-nighter. I was at this Princeton summer accelerator at the time. I pulled an all-nighter from, I worked all day and then pulled an all-nighter where I basically wrote this 15-page script. It's like, if Mark said this, I would say this. If Bethany Frankel, she was a guest shark that was in our episode, said this, I would say this. If this person said this, I would say this. If Damon John said this, I would say this. And basically ran through, here's what an entire episode would look like if you brought Thrive Plus, now known as Cheers, onto the show. And so basically, they got that email, and they never sort of told me that email was the reason that they let us back onto the show until we'd actually got to LA. We were about to go out and film the next day, and I was sitting in front of the whole production team, and the head honcho basically was like, Brooks, we've been doing Shark Tank now for about 10 seasons, or actually at our time it was 9 seasons, and we were on the last episode, so it was a full 9 seasons. So we've been doing this for 9 years, and not once has anyone ever sent to us a document with all the information that you sent. They said, look, we think you have the fight to do it. We want you to get out there tomorrow, and Mark Cuban doesn't like dietary supplements, so be prepared for a fight. Put the boxing gloves on. And so I went to bed that night thinking, tomorrow's about to be a lot of fun.
Wow. And so all this excitement and hype building up towards it, obviously you face some challenges and adversity kind of getting into the door.
Yep.
Knowing that Mark does not like dietary supplements, what was your thoughts walking in, and how did you prepare?
Yeah, I mean, my sort of opinion, right, is that if there's an elephant in the room, a conversation can never go forward, right? It takes a lot of sort of diligence dedication on the investor's part to put a pin in a subject, right, and save that subject for another time. So I knew that if Mark doesn't like dietary supplements, because most of them are snake oil, and we're in the industry and we see what other people are doing, and we're like thinking, why are you making consumers waste their money like that, right? It makes the rest of us that are actually doing it legit work bad or look bad, right? And so basically, my thought is we'd come onto the show and basically immediately try to address the issue. So I basically give my pitch, of which you can see Mark Cuban's basically in the episode visibly displeased on it. And then as I go to hand out the samples, right, as I'm handing Mark Cuban the samples, I say, Mark, I know historically that you dislike dietary supplements. I'd love to talk about that, and hopefully we'll be able to see eye to eye on the product. And so basically, we went right into it, right? So a lot of people wanted to hear more of the story, and Mark kept going shh, shh, shushing the other sharks. And basically, we went back and forth on the science until finally Mark Cuban goes, okay, dihydromycin, your main ingredient, sounds legit, and I applaud you for bringing that to market. However, you're talking about these drug delivery systems that, you're developing as a co-inventor with Princeton University. I don't think you'll be able to defend the intellectual property, and I'm out. And so, I thought we did a pretty good job, right? Because ultimately we ended up convincing Mark Cuban that dihydromycin is a legit thing, is going to be a legit category of dietary supplements in the future. And the only thing we didn't convince him of was that we'd be able to get the intellectual property on it, which we have, and he can sort of eat the salt on that one.
Sure.
But I consider it a win. Why we ended up not looking good on Shark, so I think we looked really good on Shark Tank from the viewer's perspective. I think the reason that we didn't get a deal is because in that process of working with Mark Cuban through these discussions, a lot of the other investors didn't even get to ask their business-related questions.
So Brooks, you know what just happened here today? You had a Cuban heist. You did an awful job today because you let Mark take over your presentation, and I never had a chance to learn anything. I'm out.
Right, so if you watch the end of the episode, you'll get these other sharks going like, I didn't even get to hear about the business. Like, what are their sales? What are their margins? Like, how do they produce it, right?
Yep.
And so they, I think it's bad that that didn't sort of get to occur, but I think we were sort of put into a box pretty early in the episode where you either look like scientists but a bad business team, or you look like a good business team but look like you're charlatans. And I would much rather consumers have faith in the product than in our ability to make money. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, consumers, all they care about is a good product at a reasonable price.
Absolutely. And so just one last note on the Shark Tank episode. I noticed that Bethany and Mark were kind of going at each other. What were your thoughts during that? Because it seemed pretty intense, and maybe that was editing, maybe it wasn't, but...
Every time I said, how much, like, no, homie, don't play that.
Don't interrupt me, and it's not an issue.
Mark, you can't not interrupt you because you haven't stopped talking.
Well, because
the whole
I tried to
time.
ask the right
But I
questions.
want to ask a question
It's the
too.
right
Instead
question
of talking
to
to me,
you.
ask.
I'm
Then
not supposed to
ask.
ask
Bethany,
you.
let's
Hold
go.
on.
Ask.
I'd like to ask the Don and kiss the ring. May
Feel
I
free.
now speak?
Feel free.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
No, I mean that, so when you film a Shark Tank episode, right, you actually film for anywhere between 45 minutes and an hour and 15 minutes, and then they cut that episode down to about 8 minutes to 12 minutes. And still change some things, right? Like one shark will go out before another shark or whatever. But if you look at our episode, what you see is what you get, right? Like they were very, very true to what actually occurred in that hour. So that 10 minutes, I think, was a great cut of what actually occurred in the hour that I was out there. But on the other hand, I had a friend that was on Shark Tank as well, and he put it in terms of this. He said, look, a shark has to come up with a reasonable reason that they don't want to invest in your company 160 times a year, right? So when a guest shark like Bethany Frankel comes on, she has to figure out a reasonable reason that she doesn't want to invest in the company that doesn't make her look like an idiot for every single company that she looks at, except for the one or two that she does want to invest in.
Gotcha.
So they don't really like hold it personally or anything, right? You sort of look at it and go, that's a pretty hard job in and of itself. But I think what we're sort of very proud about coming out of the episode is that, we told America our story. We didn't really get to tell them sort of about the business fundamentals, right? But we told them about our product story, what the product does and how it can help them. And then sort of it became this sort of the Mark and Bethany sort of fight type of show. But I think what ended up happening is, they ended up looking really bad, and we ended up looking really good. And anytime that you're on the same stage as a billionaire and you come away looking like the reasonable person that America ends up liking, you can't argue with that. That's a good thing.
Absolutely. And you also, in that episode, you presented the scientific value behind your company. You've proven Mark wrong. You've gotten and secured the intellectual property, correct?
That's correct. We actually just made that breakthrough this year.
Congratulations.
We flipped over a lot of stones and we spent a lot of money, and it wasn't until the last thing that we tested, that we were even going to test, that we finally got it to work and were able to get intellectual property on it. But you kind of have to think back to Christopher Columbus. I forget how long it took him to sail across the Atlantic, but on the 29th day, they all wanted him to turn around. On the 30th day, everyone hated him. The 31st day, everyone hated him. 32nd day, there's land. Everyone's like, he was right. He was right. And so entrepreneurship's a lot like that, right? It's a little bit like, charging into the dark with the best data that you have and hoping that you're going to see land before you run out of food and die.
Awesome.